So, designing an economy for a management game is, for me, pretty much like plumbing. When everything flows, nobody notices. It just works.
All of this just works. I'm not kidding.
But when something clogs up, or worse, it floods the system, everybody feels it. So, back in 2017, I kicked off this tiny little project called Project Automata. It eventually became Rise of Industry. The game did very well, to be honest. It sold like 350,000 copies and made close to 4 million euros in revenue. I'll explain some other time. And at launch, it was one of the most played strategy games on Steam. It even got picked up by a couple of universities to teach basic economics, which still feels unreal. But still, we needed to rebuild half the game from scratch. Now, here's the original idea. Take Factorio, and you put towns and shops on top. But here's the twist. In the very first versions, we didn't use any kind of money. It's not like we didn't have money for the budget for development, which we didn't. I mean that the game didn't have any kind of currency system. There wasn't any money, any pricing, any balance. It was only logistics. For example, you wanted more trucks, you needed to build them piece by piece. You want a new factory, you need to gather a lot of steel and cement. It sounded amazing, realistic, and system-driven, and awesome. It really was, but it broke down. So it turns out that when you don't have a common exchange unit, money, balancing even the most basic stuff becomes a nightmare. And every feedback loop gets muddy because every resource tree starts turning into a spaghetti mess of assumptions. And I'm Italian, I know pasta. So yeah, we brought money back in. The economy evolved because it had to, but those early lessons still haunt me to this day. When Rise of Industry launched into early access, things looked great. The Steam reviews were amazing, 90% positive. People loved it. But in a matter of weeks, 90, 80, 70, I'm not kidding, 60, 55%. It was all because of the economy. To be specific, the way progression worked. Because I kind of wanted it to be like an RPG, because you had classes of sorts. You specialize in farming, industry, logistics, whatever. And the more you focused on one thing, the better you got at it. So you farm a lot, you unlock crops and get better tractors. Honestly, on paper, it made sense and I still believe it can work, but players hated it. They felt like they had no control. There was no meaningful choices. It was just keep grinding and keep doing the thing until the game decides to reward you. In a city builder, that kind of passive progression, it feels slow, confusing, and detached. We completely stopped development for a month or two and overhauled the system. Out goes the organic progression, and here comes a traditional tech tree, so that players can pick their path. Do you want to focus on logistics? Unlock warehouses, truck depots, and other stuff. Prefer farming, annual crops, silos, tractors. Doesn't matter, up to you. The change did more than fix pacing. It made the economy feel like something the players could shape and not just something they were stuck and living inside. But it drilled home a very important truth. A good economy is not just about the math. It's something that the player needs to care about. So after that overhaul, I started thinking differently about economic design. And the metaphor that stuck with me, water or plumbing. Think of your game's currency. It doesn't matter if it's money, goods, influence. It's pretty much like water flowing through pipes. The player starts with a simple faucet. The income from sales, missions, quests, production, and so on. But where does the water go? If you put just a bathtub endlessly, they're gonna hoard it and disengage. But if it drains too fast, they feel punished and frustrated, like the game is fighting actively against them. So you need sinks. Many of them, like construction costs, upkeep, maintenance, supply chains, stuff that removes the value out of the system. But They need to feel fair, logical, and part of the world. In Rise of Industry, we tried to build this balance in with a pricing system. The raw materials, so stuff like wheat, iron, and wood, they all had fixed values. But once you started processing these into higher tier stuff like bread and steel beams, the sale price jumped. There was a clear incentive to go deeper, but not to produce more for the sake of it. You were just investing in the infrastructure that would refine and multiply your returns. And here's where it got interesting. We didn't just sum the ingredient costs and call it a day. We used what later learned to call like the technically exponential value scaling. I'm not lying, that's the actual term. At the time, I just thought of it like magic numbers that make things more expensive. Let me explain. Say that you got an apple and it costs €1, and you got a pineapple that it costs 2. If you sell both raw, you get 3. But if you combine them into a fruit salad, you put a little bit of exponent math, boom, you got a product that sells for €4. And it's not markup, it's investment logic. We built most of the product pricing this way. Get the ingredients, apply the formula, and let the players figure out what chains were worth building. And this became the core gameplay loop. Short-term survival through sales and long-term profit through infrastructure. It wasn't perfectly balanced because no system ever is, but it gave players something to manage. A faucet, a drain, and a reason to keep adjusting the valves. And now let's get serious and let's talk about the traps, because I've seen them pop up everywhere. Many of them in Rise of Industry, a billion in a different game, and they still accidentally seep into new prototypes. The first one is what I tend to call the infinite wallet. If your game doesn't have meaningful sinks, like maintenance or mainly a reason to reinvest, the players eventually reach a point where money stops mattering and it means nothing. They've got millions, but nothing to spend it on. Now, this is important. Your job is not to punish players for doing well. It's to make sure there's friction, trade-offs, and decisions to make after they've won the early game. Next up, linear progression. And this, you'll see it in many different games. So, if every new building is just objectively better than the last one, you are not creating a strategy space. You're just making a to-do list, a checklist, and that's when players stop thinking and just follow the upgrade path. That kind of progression very quickly starts to feel boring. Here's an example. How many RPGs can you name when you level up and all you get is a plus 2% crit damage? No tools, no abilities, no playstyle, just slightly better numbers. And now let's talk about the optimal path problem. And this one, every game has it. Imagine that you add mechanics, recipes, but you see that one strategy will always win. Maybe it's the bakery that has the best return. Maybe iron outpaces every single raw material. It doesn't matter the reason, but once players find that path, they exploit it and the rest of the game becomes completely irrelevant. A good economy survives scrutiny and it lets different players make different decisions based on timing, terrain, goals, and even mood. And finally, the one that stung the most: no feedback loop. In early versions of Rise of Industry, players would run into financial problems and they had no idea why. We had prices, breakdowns, expensive stats, but there wasn't clarity. There wasn't a single and proper bottleneck indicator or a breakdown that explained what was dragging them down. And when players don't understand what is going on, they quit, or worse, they blame you and assume the game is broken. Honestly, sometimes it is. So what actually makes a good economy? Now, in my mind, it's not about the realism, it's not about the balance, not the way that people think. A good economy creates tension, as it gives the player a reason to make trade-offs and not just to optimize everything. Not every game needs to be factorial or satisfactory. The system needs to be understandable, fair, and deliberate. If you're building a management game, you don't start by asking, how much should bread cost? You need to ask, what is the player trying to do and what is the best way to make it interesting? Then, and only then, you can build your faucets, place your sinks, and hand the player the wrench. Let them solve it their way. And if this helped you think a little differently about how game economies work, or why they don't, the next video will be even more useful. It's about the full process of rise of industry and what happened when we made those 4 million euros and ended up broke, but it's not a theory. It's not a case study. It's what literally happened. I'll see you there.